welcome all. Welcome to this latest episode in the data transformation series. I'm absolutely delighted to have Anne-Marie Smith here with me today. Anne-Marie and myself, unlike maybe some of the other guests, we have met on a number of occasions face to face. So, Anne-Marie, maybe I'm going to hand it over to you, and maybe you let the audience know a bit about yourself that you think is relevant to today's conversation.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you so much for having me on this program today. It's a pleasure to reconnect, and I look forward to lots of opportunities to do that. I am a consultant in enterprise data management and have been for more years than I'd care to count. My background is in the management of data as an asset, understanding the definitions of the data, which is metadata management, understanding and helping organizations develop their rules for managing data, data governance, identifying what level of quality and trust one can put in the data instances, and the metadata, the definitions. And finally, data architecture. How do we structure data so that it's accessible, usable, and at the same time that it meets the organization's needs, not just IT, but the business as well. I've been doing this my whole career since I graduated from university, and I have to say I fell into data management because I went to work for an insurance company that needed help. And they needed help in lots of areas. One of them was their data. Not surprisingly, insurance companies collect copious amounts of data. And I had a degree in management information systems, and they decided, aha, you're going to help us organize our data. I almost had no idea what they were talking about, but I figured it can't be that hard, right? They're asking a kid to do it. Well, it was a lot more of a challenge than I originally expected, but not really, because I kind of expected it to be a challenge. I moved from being a junior at this insurance company to leading what became their data management program, because they saw the value of organizing data according to best practices, rules, identifying their definitions for the data. One of the first things I discovered at this company was that there were no written definitions for any of their data elements, business terms, any of that. Everybody just knew what it meant. Trouble was, that's not true. Companies didn't know the difference between a customer and a client, and there are differences. They didn't know how to organize data so that if you bought an insurance policy for homeowners or renters insurance, and you bought a policy for covering your auto, you were two different customers. And that really skewed the results of the customer profile they had. They didn't know how to define premiums except by the generally accepted insurance standards, which are good to start, but every company has its own way of expanding that basic definition. They had never written it down. It was all just either in the actuaries' heads, the underwriters' heads, or not even. So my job became what another data management professional has called the data guru for this insurance company. And I started a small department of like-minded people who like order and structure and really find data fascinating, because I love to read, and to me, data started out as words. And we built this capability that enabled the company to really, literally transform itself. They went from this kind of backwater, reasonably small insurance company headquartered in my hometown of Philadelphia to a national company. They wrote nationally, but they had no presence. They were just there, like raisins and tapioca pudding. Because of the data management that we did over the course of several years, we were able to transform this company into a relatively medium-sized powerhouse for effective property and casualty insurance in the United States. They expanded their footprint across the country. They grew their revenues. They grew their premiums. They reduced their losses, which is even more important to most insurance companies than growing the premium, because they've reduced their exposure. They knew through facts and data, as what became the CIO said to me, we weren't going on gut feel anymore. We knew how many homeowners policies were contributing to the level of premium that we had, and what policy holders were incurring the largest losses, and how we managed that. They learned about scaling their rates to meet that data challenge, and they learned about communicating data management best practices throughout the company. We formed what would be called data stewardship teams. We built a group of people who made the big decisions about data. You would call them a data governance council now. And we were able to document and teach all these rules. And there weren't that many, but there were more than they had before, which was zero. And the best practices, the guidelines for defining data, to the point that when this company was sufficiently solvent to acquire a small struggling insurance company, we sent a team of people to do a triage for that smaller struggling company's data. And I had to do very little teaching to the team that went to do that triage. They all knew what to do. They knew that they needed to identify the data, the attributes, the data elements, the business terms, and how to define them, how to get the people at this smaller company to learn how to do the definitions right, how to document them. We learned and taught them about data governance, what rules are important to this company, and to help them implement, I don't want to say impose, implement the rules we had developed, because our rules made sense to them after they reviewed them. The acquisition of that smaller company went much smoother than a prior acquisition had, because in this acquisition, they had that data management foundation. And I can't forget that we evaluated the level of quality of the critical data elements to see what needed remediation and what data we could trust, to what extent could we trust it, and how that trusted data could be brought into our current systems, which is part of the digital transformation. They learned that their current systems weren't meeting the needs of their improved data management. So we embarked on a series of evaluations for better software, faster hardware. And over the course of about 8 years, we took this relatively underperforming little insurance company and made it into the 22nd largest insurance company in the United States. So my data journey has been started with that, and I've been passionate about it ever since, because I saw the value of data management to the success, the business success of the company.
Yeah, powerful. That's a powerful story. And it's really interesting, Anne-Marie, as well. And I know a conversation I had this morning, sometimes in the data space, when I'm talking to people, I can nearly categorize. Some are more that sort of data offensive view, and then others data defensive view. Some look at value creation maybe as that offensive, and maybe monetization as the offensive. Some as maybe governance as the defensive. But I'm not sure that's the right. It's I suppose the healthiest categorization, because I think you've called out here very effectively that actually you can transform organizations by doing good enterprise data management, and that you need both. It isn't one or the other. Any comments? And in particular, when I think of you, Amory, I always think of enterprise data management. But what is enterprise data management, and what sort of tool is it for organizations now and into the future?
Claudia, I'm going to answer your questions, I think, in the order you presented them.
That's good. And don't ask me what the questions were, because I won't remember.
One of them, is it offensive or defensive? I see it as a Venn diagram. There are aspects of offensive, data monetization, data categorization, and then there are aspects of defensive data, data governance, metadata management, but they have to be combined. And in the center is that sweet spot that enables the digital transformation using data, because you do need that offensive approach tempered by and reinforced by the defensive approach. With only taking one side, offensive or defensive, I don't see that being very successful. We can't have people running around being the data police, the defensive side, and we can't have people running around saying, you can make money from data, you can make money from data, without knowing what data is important, what rules influence that data, and how high or low quality the data is. So in my view, those two areas really are the two parts of what make up a Venn diagram, that sweet spot in the center. What do I think of? What do I mean when I say enterprise data management? It's not a technology. It's not a piece of software. It's a series of connected disciplines that enable an organization, whether it's a for-profit company, a university, a nonprofit organization, a government agency, to manage their data. And you'll see it says data and management according to best practices consistently. And the parts of enterprise data management are a data strategy, data governance, metadata management, data architecture, master and reference data management. How do we organize the common data that an organization has? I keep using the word organize in one form or another. And data quality. Those are the core areas of enterprise data management. Now, someone will say, in listening to this, what about big data? What about AI? What about business intelligence? Well, it's impossible to manage that collection of data that's now been called big data without a data strategy, without the data governance rules, without the metadata management meanings, without the reference and master data, and without the structure of data architecture. You can't manage big data without it. Artificial intelligence, business intelligence, machine learning, data science are contributing. Actually, no, let me say that another way. Enterprise data management is contributing to the success of business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science, because it's all about data. And if you don't have the right structured data developed with the right rules, if you don't know the meaning of the data that you're looking for, you don't know where it's located, if you don't know the quality of the data that you're searching for, and if you don't have an overarching strategy for managing all of these parts, you'll never be able to do machine learning, artificial intelligence, business intelligence, data science effectively. 40% of a data scientist's time is spent looking for data. Another 10% is spent cleaning up data they found, which makes it 50%. Another 10% is identifying whether the data that they found and that they have scrubbed is truly meaningful, because there are so few pieces of metadata attached to that piece of data. So that leaves only about 30% of a data scientist's time to be a data scientist, to work their magic, to analyze, and to produce results.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Those are averages. And in some cases, I've seen real numbers that say that it's closer to 80% of a data scientist, data analyst's time spent on the non-data science data management activities. Now,
and sorry, Anne-Marie, so like I want to bring you back to one thing, because I think it could be really important. Sometimes we see data as a profession, and we nearly see it as you're either a data professional or you're not, and it's nearly a homogenous thing. But actually, what you've called out, it's made up of different disciplines, and you've even said enterprise data management itself can be divided into disciplines. You know, so what sort of and data scientists might be one maybe discipline within it. Are there other types of data related disciplines in there? You've referred to the structuring of data, maybe even the infrastructure side of data, the governance side of data, the quality side of data. Do they tend, or should they all be different professionals with different areas of expertise, or can they be the one professional with many different I suppose, expertise within that?
It can go either way, Patty. I've seen people spend their entire careers in data quality. In fact, I can think of three people, some of whom you know very well, who have spent their whole career managing data quality. And why? Because that's a very important aspect. Without a really deep understanding of the business needs for quality data, the different types of data that an organization has, and the different levels of quality that need to be applied to those different types of data, you'll probably have what is downstairs in my kitchen, a junk drawer. Well, and the same thing goes for data architecture. In high-performing organizations, there are people who specialize in architecting the structures of data. Data architects, database administrators with backgrounds in data architecture, those sort of people, data modeling being an important part of data architecture, but not the only part. That's another area where I see a lot of people spending most of their careers if they find they really like it. However, I've seen more people start in one of the disciplines, data quality, data architecture, data modeling, and then expand their capabilities. And because they have a background in one of the disciplines, it makes it easier to pick up the best practices and approaches for data governance. I've seen people spend their whole career in data governance too, the rules, etc. But a lot of times those people come from other areas of enterprise data management because they understand the value of identifying the rules and implementing them consistently. Many people who go into metadata management do that because they have a background in either data quality, data architecture, or data governance, and have taken on that additional task of learning about how to define data appropriately and how to socialize those data definitions across the organization, so that when I say to you, we need to look at customer, you know what I mean by customer, because the organization has defined customer in a certain way. If I come from the outside and say the sentence, we need to look at customer, it would be important for you to ask me as an outsider, how do you define customer? Because here at Smith Industries, we define customer as X. Does it fit with your definition? That doesn't happen that often. People just think that everybody knows common definitions, and it's not true.
No, and you're right, Anne-Marie, and even within the organization, and I also had the pleasure working in the insurance industry, and the now, fortunately, again, there was a good discipline towards data within the organization I work, but I know hearing about peers that were working in other companies, there was a lot of uncertainty about the difference between a subscriber, a member, to know who the payer was. Sometimes the subscriber didn't necessarily pay because it was a company paid, but the legal contract was with the subscriber. Yes. So like all those are really, really important. And I'd like to also go back to your point, that I think someone that is really very actively involved, let's say in data governance, and built up a lot of expertise, they tend to have a specialization that a data generalist may not have. And I think that there's a certain amount of maturity comes from that, where organizations recognize there's many different sub-disciplines within the discipline of data. And that's, I think, a really important point. I also want to go back and maybe try and land on this for a while, because I know you've also picked it up on some of the discussions that have been ongoing within the data transformation lab, and you've been raising, I suppose, the flag, saying, guys, you can't talk about digital transformation without talking about data and the role of data, and I suppose being a real advocate for a bigger voice for data within the digital transformation agenda. Can you tell us a bit about what that means to you and what maybe it should look like, in your opinion, Anne-Marie?
Paudie, thank you for noticing. One of the things I have discovered as people talk about digital transformation is that, generally speaking, executives, leaders, managers think of digital transformation in the forms of hardware, software, bright, shiny objects. Now, in certain work companies and in certain industries, that's really important, because let's take our insurance company shared background. A lot of insurance companies are still working on systems that were built in the 1970s. I can't bear to think of what I was doing in the 1970s still being around. But focusing on just implementing new software and new hardware with the same quality, structure, and, let's say, lack of governance for data means that you're putting old wine into new bottles, and you're not going to get the results that you had hoped for. A really effective digital transformation isn't just about looking at new equipment, new hardware, new software, fiber optic networks. It's about looking at the business, the organization, even if it's a nonprofit or university or government agency, holistically. And what's one thing that every organization has and has copious amounts of? Data. What's flowing through all those systems that are under scrutiny for being digitally transformed? Data. What's the byproduct of all of that? Information. If we aren't looking at what is flowing through those current systems, if we aren't looking at what we want to get out of new environments, new software, new hardware, we're neglecting at least 50% of the digital transformation exercise, effort, initiative, whatever noun you want to put to it. Without the real deep scrutiny on the current state of your data and information, the management of your data and information, and how that is affecting, positively or negatively, the operations of the organization, and focusing only on, well, let's buy an ERP, let's buy a project management system, let's implement fiber optic networks, let's buy new hardware. All of them are great, but without looking at the data and the information and how it is managed to benefit the business or not managed, once again, I'll reiterate, you're going to put old wine in new bottles, and that never works well. You'll actually be farther behind, because you will have spent all this money on that new hardware, new software, new infrastructure, and you'll still have your lousy data.
Mm-hmm.
And people at the organization won't understand what didn't go well. Why isn't this being successful?
And you've laid it right out, Anne-Marie, because if I heard it correctly, you said if an organization is about to go on that digital transformation journey, if the data agenda is not being looked at, it's essentially missing 50% of the initiative itself.
Yes, sir.
If that's, yeah, so that's
Yes,
laying it straight out here for our audience. So let's say we go back to that fictional insurance company, and let's say, look, they don't have maybe that history of rigor when it comes to data. It's a brownfield site, Anne-Marie. Let's say you're brought in the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. What would you be doing in that company, with them, for them, etc.? Do you think? Very unfair question, by the way, but I'm still going to ask it.
No, not unfair at all. I've done it multiple times, so I can draw on my experience and say, this is what we did, and this is what we would do. First 30 days, we would help the organization identify key stakeholders for digital transformation in general and data management specifically. That may take about 15, 20 days. And the other 10 days of the first 30 days would be socializing the fact that these stakeholders are going to go on the journey with us, and we're going to start the journey now, and this is the reason for the journey. So the first 30 days include some level of socialization, because even if the executives think this is a good idea, we have to gather the management and the rank and file, because it's not a journey of a small group of people. Get the stakeholders to work with us to develop an assessment of their current state. Now we'll have our digital transformation partners, and I'm not hardware, software, network knowledgeable, so I would not be leading that effort. They'd be doing an assessment of the current state of their hardware, software, network, etc. But we would look at, over the next 30 days, probably usually takes about 8 to 10 weeks from start to finish, to do a thorough assessment of all the areas of enterprise data management in this company. What are their strengths? Where are they doing okay but need a little help? Where are they not succeeding and need more help? And where are they failing miserably? So instead of triage, which is 3, we do it at 4 levels. How are their data governance processes? How's their level of metadata management? How have they structured or not structured their master data management? What's their level of enterprise data architecture? What types of data quality rules do they have and expectations? And do the data that they currently collect and use meet those quality rules? What are the cultural challenges that the organization faces when it comes to data and data management? How many people in the company are skilled in any of those disciplines? Do you have a data strategy? If it's a document, has it been implemented and socialized? If you don't have a data strategy, let's go back to the business strategy and see how we can develop a companion data strategy that will come up with us on this journey. And then present the results, which really looks like a version of the capability maturity model. Here's where you are, and you're at levels 0 through 5 in each one of these areas. Here's what you're doing well. Here's what you can improve and then do really well. Here's where you need to work harder, and here's where we need to start because you haven't done any of that. That's your next 10 weeks at the most, 8 weeks usually. And in that 10 weeks, 8 weeks, we build with the company a roadmap to get from the current state to various stages of a desired future state. the roadmap usually doesn't exceed the first 2.5 years, because by then things will have changed and it's time to revisit the roadmap. We have clients that ask us for 5-year roadmaps, and I put myself on mute and chuckle because 5-year roadmaps are really not worthwhile. But 2.5 years, yeah.
And just to bring you back to a few points, Amory, because I think they're really important. One is I'm going to ask the question because I think a lot of us use the term, but we're not sure what it is, and I'm not sure we always see it in the same way. What is a data strategy?
Oh, great question, Patty. A data strategy is a high-level statement, not one sentence, but it's a series of plans for what the organization sees about its data, what the purpose of data is to the organization, how central it is, what are the general expectations for data usage, and how does that general expectation for data fit into the business strategy. It's usually no more than about half a dozen pages, but without a good, consistent data strategy, the organization doesn't know whether it needs to start or improve a data governance program. Maybe they have one and it's been failing miserably. They don't know what their view is for managing data definitions and formats, et cetera, meaning metadata. They don't know whether or not they want to engage in master data management. Maybe they're happy in silos. And some organizations that makes sense because they're so totally different business units that sharing master data across those silos doesn't make a lot of sense. That happens occasionally. Many times it doesn't. So a good data strategy would point that out for Smith Industries, because we are in the following 3 disciplines for 3 industries, and we make eyeglasses, we make coffee mugs, and we make picture frames. Chances are we're not going to be sharing a lot of master data.
No, and I really liked even the simplicity of your definition, Anne-Marie. You know, data strategy, it's a high-level statement really of the importance of data to your organization, but also builds that bridge to the business strategy. Now, I just want us to hold that thought, and I know you also, and we've had discussions about the importance really of, you know, data literacy. And you can have a strategy, but if you don't have the literacy, then what are the sort of issues we're seeing, and why is data literacy becoming such an important part of the discussion of data in organizations at the moment, Anne-Marie?
Oh, what a great question. We can have a data strategy that's been developed by really smart people in the company and with help from outside, because that's usually the best way to do it. People inside the company always have those blinders, not calling them bad, nefarious, or stupid, just that this is the environment they work in. Bringing in somebody from the outside to help with the data strategy takes away those blinders and opens it up. You can have the best data strategy, but if the organization is not data literate, if the individual contributors and managers at the organization don't know the current state of their data, don't know where to get the data they need to solve problems, answer questions, don't know how to read a chart, how to read a graph, don't know what chart or graph to use to present data, if that's something that role should be doing, then having the greatest data strategy on earth and actually having clean data, well governed, rightly defined, etc., means that you've got this resource that's not usable. On the bookshelf behind me, I have a bunch of books. Some of them are critical to any professional. If I can't read them and understand them and know how to implement them, having the books on that shelf is just holding up the shelf's It's just not doing anything for me. There's no point to it. So without data literacy, having the world's greatest data strategy and having implemented the world's greatest data management program means very little. You have to have a data literate workforce.
That's it, yeah. And it's that intent execution gap, isn't
Yes.
it? We have an intent in a strategy, but we just don't have the capability to execute because we don't have that literacy. Anne-Marie, from your point of view, and I know our discussions, have go back not far off a decade probably at this stage, but where are we in terms of data literacy within organizations at the moment?
Patty, right now, the topic of data literacy is hot in certain circles. But I would submit that barely, according to Gartner research, it's not I who's submitting it, it's Gartner research, barely 21% of managers in organizations feel that they have a workforce that is sufficiently data literate to do what I just described. Also, according to Gartner, almost 3/4 of management doesn't trust the data they have, not because it's bad, but because they don't know how to trust it. So they make their decisions based on gut feel, intuition. That shows that these managers are not data literate. It doesn't mean that the company doesn't have good data. It just means they don't know. And Gartner also has said that close to 70% of people who work in organizations in a professional position or a clerical position struggle with data literacy. They don't know how to interpret a statement. 25% of readers question the value of X. They don't know what that really means. They don't know whether the data comes from a valid source, whether it's gone through any rigorous testing. They don't know if it's 25% of a population of 10 or 25% of a population of 10,000. And they don't know how to make actions, to not to say implement, but to act on that statement. All of those things combined make for a less than literate, as far as data is concerned, workforce.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on, Anne-Marie. And I think like what I'm seeing in an organization, nearly the build out of the technical part of data is nearly increasing exponentially. We've all these, tools, approaches, and yet our ability to make sense of data is hardly increasing at all. So
Exactly.
we've a growing gap, if anything, and I think it's a major issue. Anne-Marie, I've so many points written down here. It's like I'm like someone in the sweet shops. So which one will I pick next? And yet I know I'm also watching the clock. I suppose, let's say in terms of you have been in this space for also a number of decades. What's really exciting you about the space that you're seeing that's starting to emerge now?
Patty, that's a wonderful question. And it's one I ask myself every couple months so that I don't get stale and I don't get jaded. The excitement is that the topics we've talked about so far today have been the basis for discussions outside of just the data community. We have CEOs of manufacturing organizations. We have directors of nonprofits. We have all sorts of people in high places talking about the need for an improvement in the management of the data they collect. We have regulations that are popping up worldwide, starting with Europe's GDPR. Thank you so much for starting that effort, because it's spawned efforts all around the world to recognize the need for better data and the need for better controls, which is part of data governance. And in looking at those regulations, some of them apply to the quality of data. That's also exciting because you can have lots of rules, lots of definitions, but if the quality of the actual data values is poor, what's the point? And last but not least, I love the emergence of the topic of data literacy. We have a generally literate workforce, people who can read, write, understand, interpret in their native tongues. That's an achievement over the course of probably a couple centuries, but it's exponentially higher now than it ever has been. That's marvelous. We need to do the same thing with data. You don't have to be someone who can write iambic pentameter like William Shakespeare to be literate. You don't have to be a data scientist to be data literate. You don't need the tools of Python and R and very highly complicated software to be data literate. You have to understand the foundations. And that's one of the things that's exciting me, this emergence of that knowledge, that
Yeah,
understanding.
I love that, and obviously it's from the voice of someone very experienced in the space. What I also like, Anne-Marie, is this idea that data shouldn't be secondary, nearly something that's produced as a result of maybe some sort of transformation exercise. We need to be doing data by design. It needs to be an active part, a really central part of everything we do. It shouldn't be behind the curtain, and it's something, look, it's just an offshoot of what we're doing. And I think bringing that discipline into these transformation exercises and into the day-to-day operations is so important. You know, Anne-Marie, and again, these are, you know, they're not easy questions. If you're to walk into an organization, are there a few things that will tell you very quickly about the maturity of that organization towards data, and what would they be?
I can answer that question.
Cool.
Because I'm thinking of a particular organization that is in the process of selling itself to a much larger entity. And they have good industry processes. They are financially stable. They're the right type of company for this larger organization to consider buying. However, I went into the organization and asked questions. Do you have any idea of what data you collect? It's all in our systems. I don't need to know that. This is from the CEO. I don't need to know any of that. Our systems do that. Okay. Do you have any idea of how good the actual data is? They're a commodities company, so they're not oil, but I'm going to use oil as the example. You know, different levels of crude oil. You know which ones are good, which ones are medium. You know what level of quality you should expect from this grade of crude oil. Turn that to data. Do you know the level of quality that you have for critical pieces of data? Well, all my data is the same. None of it's less critical or more critical than the others. That's a problem too. Okay, let's just take that step back and ask, do you know the level of quality for all your important data? Data just is. Doesn't have quality. That shows that that's an issue. Do you have a way for explaining to people in the company what you mean by customer, what you mean as customer versus client? What do you mean by the calculations you use to determine how you're going to sell this commodity? Well, we just understand. We just know. People have been here a long time. They know what a customer is. They know what a client is. Aren't they the same? I don't know. How have you defined it? And for those calculations, yeah, they're in the people's who need them's heads. We just know. Do you have anybody responsible for identifying the rules that you use to manage the data. Like I said, it's all in the systems. We don't need rules. Isn't that what the systems are for? And last but not least, you get reports. Do you get reports from your systems? Yes. Are they valuable? No. I just know the business. I know what I need to know. The systems people insist that they give me the reports. This is all true. I'm not making this up. This is a real company. Mm. That, in a nutshell, Patty, shows me that they are at probably on a 0 to 5 continuum for maturity for data management. They're probably at a -5.
What great questions, and they remind me of, something I've seen elsewhere as well, Anne-Marie. You ask someone, what are the most important questions you need to answer on a day-to-day basis to keep this organization healthy, surviving, yes, thriving? Then what are the most important concepts within those questions, and how do you define them? What sort of quality data have you that shine a light on each of those concepts? And I think they're beautiful questions you have. And you reminded me of something, and you reminded me of a conversation we had before. And we were up for time, but I'm still going to ask it. Okay. I remember us talking before about data is an asset, but you said it's not like oil. It's not. Data is not the next oil.
That's true. It's not. Oil is a commodity that once you get it out of the ground and you refine it and you consume it, it's gone. You have to go get more. Data is, I don't want to say it is the only, but it's probably one of the only renewable assets. Once you have the data, you can refine it, improve it, but it's not going away. You can use it multiple ways if it's done properly. If you store it well, if you apply the right rules, including privacy and protection rules to it, it ain't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Unlike oil, consumable, data is renewable. And that's why I take a little bit of concern with the phrase, data is the new oil. If by that statement, the speaker meant that it is a lifeblood for organizations, I would agree, but it's not new. Data's been around since, let's say the Code of Hammurabi, the ancient Egyptians, maybe even the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians had tablets, and they had people checking tablet A to tablet B to see whether or not the items entered on tablet A balanced with the items entered on tablet B. It's not new.
No, what a great answer, and what a great advocate you are, and an ambassador for treating data as an asset in organizations. Anne-Marie, and I really value our discussions. I need to just mention why I'm sitting in front of a fire here. I know I promised you a fireside chat, and I know we've also spoken about that we would have a fireside chat with you back here in Ireland, literally sharing stories, etc., and sharing them with an audience. Unfortunately, for different reasons, COVID being probably the biggest one, that didn't happen. So I said I'd treat you to the fire today, without everything else that goes with a fireside chat in a pub or whatever else.
Right.
And Marie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. But what I want to also leave with, where can others find more about you and find more about the work that you do?
2 places, Patty, and thank you for asking. The website EWSolutions.com is the website about the consulting company for whom I work, and case studies for almost all of the organizations I mentioned today are there. You can learn about that. You can learn about what we do. And if you're interested in data management as a profession, there is an online free resource, DataManagementU, as in university.com. Hundreds of articles, webinars, white papers, all sorts of resources for all the areas of data management. And we've added business intelligence, business analysis, project management, and professional development. So if this is an area that interests you, either as a data professional or as a what Dr. Tom Redman calls a regular person who knows that they use data in their work and they really need to learn more about this, go to datamanagementu.com. It's subscribing is free, and read the articles and start a discussion. I'll be happy to discuss it with anybody. As you can tell, I'll talk to wallpaper.
and not just talk to wallpaper, but they're very, I suppose, productive conversations as well, Anne-Marie. And I have a sense as well, Anne-Marie, we're going to see you more on this series, because I know there's certain people that both you and I would like to interview going forward. And I think this is a great opportunity of doing that, even both of us together doing it going forward. So that's something I'm really, really looking forward to it. So Anne-Marie, I'd really like to say thank you so much for spending your time, and for anyone that's trying to find Anne-Marie, I really think those sources she pointed are a real treat, in terms of the data and the insights available. So Dr. Anne-Marie Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pawty O'Reilly, and I can't wait for the next installment of what we do together. Can we start it now?
Yeah, we can start now.